Good evening, friends, colleagues, students, and fellow humans who call Singapore home. Welcome. Thank you for joining this special occasion hosted by the Asia Research Institute, and a special thanks to Tae Minghua and Sonia Lam for all of their organization plans. I'm humbled and overwhelmed by your interest in what might appear to some to be the most mundane topic, home. In fact, I wonder how many of you had this dialogue or this conversation with your colleagues and friends today. Hey, any plans tonight? Yeah, I'm going to the National Library to learn about home. Won't you learn more about home by going home? I hope that tomorrow you can share with those same friends and colleagues some new insights into what happens behind closed doors in Singapore and what makes home such a fascinating topic. To that end, tonight we've assembled artists, scholars, and students to share their creative and scholarly works on home and their insights on this frequently overlooked place and idea. Before we continue, though, you might be wondering, who am I, and why am I saying something about home, specifically in this location? I'm Chris McMorrin, non-Singaporean and non-permanent resident, application pending. Who might at first glance appear to have no standing to speak on the topic of home in Singapore. In fact, I mostly teach about contemporary Japanese society, as I'm based in the Department of Japanese Studies at the National University of Singapore. But I'm also a geographer, interested in how home is lived, imagined, idealized, defended, and reproduced at geographic scales from the family residence to the nation. 4 years ago, this interest led me to design a module that asks these same sorts of questions about home in general and more specifically about Singapore. It's called Home. In the module, we discuss how home intersects with politics, economics, society, mobility, identity, and more. So here's a brief taste. The word home is ubiquitous and powerful. At the scale of the family residence, we sink our life savings into homes, and sometimes stick with terrible jobs just to pay the mortgage. We also fill our homes with loved ones and memories, but we're also encouraged always to fill our homes with objects to make them more comfortable and reflective of our personalities. Beyond the front door, we're told that virtually any place can be considered home. Even Changi Airport, that the place that efficiently whisks us in and out of Singapore, advertises itself as home. Elsewhere, we're surrounded by reminders to love, protect, and identify our neighbors, our neighborhoods, our nations, and even our planet as home. And of course, they are home. These are the places where we dwell, where our daily routines and personal relationships converge with discourses about what constitutes home and who belongs. Students learn in my module that family members, businesses, and many institutions all know that it takes more than 4 walls and a roof to make a place feel comfortable and safe, and that these institutions and people all have a stake in making us, or at least trying to make us, feel at home. So tonight we're going to look more deeply at how home is being explored and represented in creative and scholarly ways in Singapore today, through presentations by 5 speakers. Our first speakers are, let me switch gears here. Our first speakers are Eitaro Ogawa and Tamae Iwasaki. They collectively work under the name Keyakismos, and they produced a book that was one of the inspirations for tonight's meeting, a massive tome called HDB, Homes for Singapore. It was co-authored with Tomohisa Miyauchi. In their quest to learn more about the unvarnished reality of HDB life, they challenged the assumption that Singaporeans are intensely private. Along the way, they proved that a smile and a little courage can open doors to the amazing diversity of economic class, religion, ethnicity, and design found in HDB flats. So please join me in welcoming Keyakismos.
My name is Tamae.
My name is Eitaro.
And when we work together, we call it Keyakismos. And the name of the tree, name of the flower combined together. So that it's a kind of belief that when two things come together to collaborate, we can go beyond one's capability. So that's our name as a group. Yep.
Yep. And I would like to introduce our book project. That is the HDB Homes of Singapore. I think later I can bring the physical book. And then how this project came about, and also why we wanted to do this project. Yep. And I will go very quick. Okay. So project started 2013 February to 2017 March, which is 4 years. So it took quite a while. And then the flat that we took is 118 flats. And number of people who help, 5 to 5 means it's like a flat owners, and then people who supported through Indiegogo crowdfunding to raise the fund for us to print the book. And this is the team, myself, Eitaro, and Tomo. Tomo is actually an architect teacher in NUS, and it's kind of coincidence, and these three are the group. And I want to start the story from the way we used to live, which is Seletar Air Base. Now 70% of Seletar Air Base is gone and is become a factory area. But 2003 to 2008, we lived there until the time that we all need to move out. And we enjoy the place so much. 2 of the children are born there. And you can tell that one is in the swimming pool and one is in the hammock sleeping. And we collect junks and we enjoy the life so much. So when we needed to move out, and we knew that it's only, the choice we had, because it's the rental of the apartments are very expensive already. So we considered having one HDB flat. And as you see, the HDB flats from outside, it looks quite rigid and looks all the same. And just imagine from the outside, maybe the people are living in the same way, exactly, together. So it was a bit of fear to live in this building, because we are from art and we want to be unique. Always the uniqueness is very important for us. So it's like, to be one of these. So it was a fear, honestly. And then one of our friends, the art teachers, is just moving to the HDB flat and invited us for a party. And we joined, and it was amazing, because he renovated it's just freely as he wanted. And we didn't know that HDB allow people to renovate, because in Japan, public housing is not allowed for you to renovate. So it became like a big dream project for us, because we wanted to buy one HDB flat. Then we could renovate. We can make our own home, like a dream home. And then it's like this project, from very difficult choice to the very exciting, things. So it became a big change. And then immediately we talk about, we got to make a book about this, because so many people don't know about this fact. So we were keep talking about that, but it never happened, because we didn't know how we could publish the book and how much does it cost. We didn't know anything about that publishing. So we waited for 4 years. And then we met Tomo, who is architect and teaching in NUS, in this exhibition at NUS 2013. So we waited for 4 years, and we wanted to have someone knows everything we don't know, so that we can accomplish this project. And then Tomo, after 5 minutes talk, we knew that we gotta do this, and then we immediately started. It's very naturally and very organically. So Tomo actually have his camera in his hand, but it's very small, and we are surprised that, is this the photo camera that we are taking photograph? They say yes. So we just started, we didn't talk about money, we didn't talk about when we're going to finish, but we just started and then just continuously finding the place. And we already lived in Singapore for a long time, so we have network, we have passion, and we are already living in the HDB flat for a while, so we know how much, the HDB flat is good. And Tomo just arrived. When we met him, he just arrived like 2 months before that. So he wanted to know that how people live in public housing in Singapore. That was a very good study for him as an architect. So it was a perfect match. And then after about 2 years of taking photographs, and we finally knew from him that we need about $60,000 to print the book. And I said, oh, where to get this money? So we come up with this crowdfunding. And then you can see this is the final result, so 29,288. And also, amazingly, National Art Council approached us and why not you apply for this grant? And we applied and we received the grant. So it was just right for the printing cost. Okay, this video, when I reduced the file size, it became a little bit of, so please bear with this little...
Low quality video.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know whether they... Down flat.
So we didn't spend almost any money for kitchen shelves.
This is our front door of the sanitary
house.
We kind of waited for this to be dumped, and then we pick it up and install it.
It's green color glass window. It's really charming. This is where we carry because problem. So instead of fixing, we just take it away. So this is for children to communicate. Drawings.
So getting lower to higher.
How do they draw here? They use the chair.
HDB flies looks very rigid and looks similar each other. So because we are like kind of artists, I don't know, we were not very sure about living in one of them. And then some of the friends that is working as art teachers, they invited us for their flat that they bought and renovated. The interiors was like quite amazing because it's outside looks all the same, but inside is completely different. We are from Japan and the other foreigners and they're interested in like HDB flat in Singapore. They're easier to accept that, okay, so you are interested in the Singapore culture. But then it's why not you come in? So most of the people, maybe 80% of people that we knock on the door, they say okay to come in and shoot at the spot. We really confirm that this country is safe country, and because we can just let us, go in like if we are strangers and we talk and have exchange contact, and that was quite really amazing.
Some of them took us to Hoka Center nearby, introducing their favorite food. So it was really actually very joyful journey. When we came to Singapore, one of the comments we hear quite often was there's no culture in Singapore. We want to prove wrong. By making this into the book, we have almost like access to all these each different type of houses. We thought it's like a hidden treasure of Singapore.
So after the video, you can see how we did how we approach, and this is the last flat that we shot. And then, since we are doing the project by ourselves, we didn't have a deadline. And then, how are we going to end this and how are we going to push ourselves, because all of us had a full-time job. But then the Tomo brought the amazing news that he was chosen for the Venice Biennale curator team. And then he pushed this project for Singapore Pavilion, and it was chosen. So every lantern has carried 3 photographs from one flat, and it was beautifully exhibited. And finally, we did the launching event at the National Design Center when Venice Biennale show came back to Singapore. And then at the end, a 5 kg book is published. We didn't expect that big size, but then Tomo said, let's make a biggest book ever. It's like, okay. And then a lot of people mentioned that they wanted to buy, went to the Kinokuniya or wherever, then look at it, oh, maybe not. A lot of people like, oh, yep. And then I will pass to Eitaro just for flashing some photographs.
Yes, I will just to flash some of the photographs. And by the way, we brought some books today, so if you are interested, you can browse it, you can have it. We have 4 copies with us today. Okay. Now we like to introduce a little bit of the inside of the houses. And from the foreigner, like from Japanese point of view, one of the things that triggers our eyes, like a mind, was these wedding photographs for every house. Like some of you are already like chuckling and smiling. It is very common in Singapore, in the master bedroom, beautiful marriage photographs are there. And they are actually very, very big. And that really surprised us a lot, because usually in Japan we hide it very small in the album. And, more the time it goes, more different you become compared to the photographs that you took. So we start to wonder who they are, but obviously, the answer is themselves. But we found that the family unit in Singapore is so strong, and they are very closely knitted. And something that we really enjoy seeing, and as a strong family bonding in the house. It is a beautiful thing about Singapore. And also these people that we visited, they really welcome us with the drinks and the food, and they share about the stories. So Tomo was the one taking photographs from the beginning to the end. While he's working, we are the one in charge of consuming all the food and the drinks and having fun with them. Then the auntie on the right side, she's really showing me how to be healthy, how to exercise. And when we have like a few visits of the homes on one of the Saturday or Sundays, at the end of the day, we become really full of a lot of drinks and a lot of food. Then this also was a family project for us. Tomo has 4 kids. We have 2 kids. So sometimes we visit all group of the family together, like 10 of us. So even though we are like the stranger for them, most of the people welcomed us. They took us, all our children, into their homes. And when we asked, can we take your bedroom, your closet? Is there any place that we shouldn't go? That kind of questions that most of the people said, don't worry, just go anywhere else and take whatever photographs. So that was a very good surprise for us. And this is a credit that as Tamae mentioned, not only these people, but we have the group of people who opened the house, which is really a great gift for us. And also the people who supported financially for the Indiegogo. And everyone really contributed to make this project happen. Then you can see there are many different cultures and different religions and different languages. All sorts of things are happening in this HDB flat, and we really admire that kind of, a unity in a diverse situation, which is very, very unique to Singapore. Singapore outside, when we look at it, quite clean and neat, but when we get home, we get to see some messy houses, which we really like it very much. and some artistic houses that it's like an exhibition space. And one of the things we really wanted to emphasize was that the culture or art, the creativity start from home, and I think it's end at home as well, because that's where we don't pretend. We are ourselves being there to do things that we like it. So there is no need to so-called project the image of ourselves. We can be ourselves there. And this house is very interesting too. I just added to the story that this man do the renovation each time as they like it. And when somebody reported some of the illegal renovation they do, they get reported, he get reported, and he need to tear it down. And before tearing down, he take all the photographs, call the newspapers, TV shows, and ask them to document. Then after that, he tear it down, everything. Then he said, I'm fine to tear it down because he can make another renovation that he likes it. So in a way, it's a very creative way of living. It's a very unique house that you can see. Yep. So some of the yoga teachers' house is completely empty. So there is a big, the connection, like strong connection between this person and the people who makes this house. The house and the people's connection is really reflect who they are through the eyes of this the housing. Yep. Okay. I'll just go back there and ending it. Basically, while we are taking all these photographs doing project, we really thought, as I mentioned in the video, it's a treasure. It's hidden inside of the walls, and we cannot see it. But every different houses, each houses belongs to each individuals, and we found every life there is precious and treasurable. And so that each time when we knock the door to get into the house, it's like opening up the treasure box to find out what's hidden inside of it. And actually for this time, we also want to express our thank you for all the people who help in Singapore, because of actually we didn't create anything. We are just capturing what's happening inside the house, but every person who lives there are the creator of each houses, and we really admire for what they are doing there. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Our next speaker is Lilian Chee. She's Associate Professor and History Theory Criticism Research Cluster Leader at the Department of Architecture at National University of Singapore. She's a writer, a designer, a curator, and an award-winning educator whose work first came to my attention in 2014 when I saw her really amazing video film, 3 Flats, at the NUS Museum. I believe she'll talk a little bit about it today. Since that time, I've read and admired her scholarship, shared it with my students, and really admired her insights into the intersections of gender and the built environment here in Singapore. Lilian.
Thank Chris, Sonia, and Ari for inviting me, and also Minghua for helping me this morning in my panic to prepare the visuals. It's been 3.5 years since this film was released, and I think that now I do have a critical distance from it to be able to talk about it from a different point, from a point of being an academic, rather than being someone who did the work and had a very personal investment with the people whom I worked with. So I want to show you a clip of the film, and then after that I'll follow by the talk.
Take a photo first, then we open it.
Open again? Huh? 3, 2, may open, okay?
老婆是新加坡的。
老婆新加坡人啊。
Speaking of 5 years.
5 years you like Singaporean.
So my own recent research, and actually I moved on from here already, but I think Chris said to share this work, so I'm revisiting it. It explores, and it still does at this present point, the gender biases of domestic architecture in Singapore. The public housing policy in Singapore is outwardly pro-heteronormative family. And until recently, singles could not ballot for new subsidized public housing units in Singapore. They can now to get 2-room built-to-order flats, but they could purchase it from the open market upon reaching the age of 35 years old. And coincidentally, for a woman, it is also a critical age which marks female biological fertility. With almost a third of the national population now choosing singlehood, the issue of preferential housing for nuclear families is a pressing one. And here I think the slides which I will show are markedly different from yours, the ones that Keyakismos has just shown. So it looks very lonely and quiet, maybe. Yet how does one contemplate the issues of social inclusion, spatial justice, and gender when the architectural discourse of nationalized public housing does not even recognize these terms? It is from within this academic roadblock that I conceptualized the architectural essay film Tree Flats. The film, a collaboration with award-winning Singaporean filmmaker Lilian, revolves around the domestic lives of 3 single women in Singaporean public housing units. Edited from over 200 hours of footage, it's close to 90 minutes, and 8 months of filming. Tree Flats is an affective portrait of public housing visualized from the interiors of the flats. It shows HDB living, or the aspiration towards making a home, and it's about household interiors, homemaking, and finding roots. It is seen through 3 households presided by 3 women who dwell alone. Consider these 3 scenes. A woman moves slowly between her kitchen and her bedroom. The flat is quiet as she works on her old sewing machine. Another woman makes a large charcoal drawing in her living room. She fills every surface of her flat with collectibles. A third woman entertains her friends in the cramped corridor outside her flat at the end of the Muslim Ramadan month. She is dressed in her finest clothes. These public housing interiors are only 3 amongst the thousands found in Singapore, a country famed for its mass housing program. The HDB flat is synonymous with the nuclear family, yet these 3 women are neither mother nor wife. They live alone. In contrast to the heroic modernist facades that are often at the forefront of public housing in Singapore, the film depicts these 3 flats as a set of interiorized circumstances. That is to say, it is about spaces that are shaped by the quotidian, the ordinary, and the mundane. The nondescript stove, the neglected potted plant, the crystal jars which make a once-a-year appearance during festivals, the empty dining table, the precious sewing machine, the cluttered wardrobe, the unwieldy collection of books, sentimental toys, and photographs are given as much weight as the spaces that hold them. Tree Flats is an experiment in architectural representation. It questions architecture's propensity to remove affect and life from architectural representation. Its impetus is the rich material offered by domesticity, which architectural discourse on Singaporean public housing has ultimately disregarded, neutralized, or repressed. Contrary to current practice, where public housing is spoken through the planner or the architect's language, what happens to the discourse of public housing when it's experienced through a domestic perspective? The focus on domesticity inevitably forefronts the milieu of public housing. Milieu refers to a surrounding environment which impinges on the object and describes architecture as a non-insular object. Architecture is always in the middle of something. In Tree Flats, we find public housing in the milieu of gendered bodies marked by age, sexuality, ethnicity, and class, and the multiply complex domestic situations of the 3 women. Domesticity is studied here not so much because they are contained with the architecture of public housing and so must be given attention, but rather, I would argue, it must be addressed because it gives presence to architecture. In other words, Three Flats contends that domesticity gives public housing architecture its form. As a consequence, the architecture of public housing is portrayed not as anterior to occupation, but its architecture comes into being as a consequence of someone living in it. Through domesticity and moving beyond block upon homogeneous block, public housing gains an identifiable identity. The camera is used as a critical alternative to the architectural drawing, which has been the primary vehicle through which the spaces of public housing have been represented. The camera becomes a means of seeing and deciphering space. This is done through observational cinema, which favors duration and repetition. The camera suggests a kind of objectivity. The architectural drawing proposes an authorial stance. In effect, the result privileges neither objectivity nor subjectivity, as the three occupants who are at first tilted when confronted by the camera perhaps learn to perform for it and then gradually forget its existence as days and months pass. There is no conventional narrative in Three Flats. The cuts are woven together by similarities across the three domestic spaces and the cyclical events that unfold in each. Washing, sweeping, vacuuming, hanging up laundry, cooking, eating, sleeping, decorating, watching television, and entertaining are cast as affective events where nothing happens, but also where dramatic content naturally occurs when slippages and gaps show up during banal routines. Affect refers to intensities and heightened atmospheres which are shared and sensed, particularly through our bodily engagement with a scene, a space, or an environment. This visceral relationship may in turn evoke images and recollections of our own experiences and encounters. Affect is, as the feminist cultural theorist Lauren Vallant explains, the body's active presence to the intensities of the present, and its scholarly pursuit can communicate the condition of a historical moment's production as a visceral moment. By reading architecture through affect, we reanimate its post-design phase by considering the building's continual production of meaning and significance through use and occupation, and through our relations with and through its environment. The affective events in Three Flats are the unremarked but not unremarkable acts of three single women who produce their own domestic spaces in a housing landscape that privileges coupling and family. For Henri Lefebvre, the quotidian inscribes a double space. To quote, "It is the residuum of all possible specific and specialized activities outside of social experience and the product of society in general. It is a point of delicate balance and that where imbalance threatens." What does it mean to make a home of one's own for a single woman? How are the politics of family life renegotiated by these women through such spaces? In understanding singlehood as an alternative condition for housing, different modes of householding and communality may become imaginable. In translating everyday architecture through film and then reflecting on it, there is the possibility, as Berlant argues, of capturing an aesthetics and attending to the affective events that belong to a history of the present. In other words, the Three Flats become spaces to be deciphered rather than spaces which are ordinary or nondescript. The significance of public housing architecture is reproduced and co-produced through moments of occupation, use, experience, and encounter enacted by the three women. In the film, the three households oscillate in their significance between banality and exceptionalism. This is what Tim Goh describes as the way architecture inevitably becomes part of the frame of everyday life and its unavoidable withdrawal into the background and cuts off all alternative imaginations of it itself. The outcome of Three Flats is to materially manifest the vision of homemaking for single women in public housing before the notion of public housing for families congeals into common sense. This alternative vision is subjective in the way that it demands the audience's retentive memory of these households, their repetitive or individual details, and incessantly tedious routines. It relies on both attention and inattention, such that this memory is almost always evoked by the person who is looking, you. The reading of the film inevitably draws the audience's personal grasp of scenes, objects, events, and details common to his or her everyday domestic existence and intersecting with the images seen in the film. The three flats may be read as banal or unworthy of narration, but the occupants' routines and the spaces they make can also be seen as elusive and hard to define. One may ask, what is the true nature of these spaces, or what they represent as a collective, when in fact the meanings and spaces of home in the three featured households, as with all households with similar quotidian events, are continually being revised and are both generic as well as unique. The disclosure of these spaces as a kind of generalized epistemology is necessarily partial. It exposes the impossibility of knowing the space of home as a complete concrete materiality. The film emphasizes the significance of images between images as the camera moves between the three flats and also between what we see and what we are conditioned to see. Cinema represents domestic space in its truest materiality. That is to say, it encompasses domesticity's deadly duration and repetition, a quality which gives extreme weight to this most mundane of spaces. This characteristic shifts the production of space from one of authority, say by the HDB, by the architect, by the filmmaker, to that of the occupant. Three Flats attempts to address what film theorist Yvonne Margulis identifies as the key to deciphering home, an understanding of the ordinary or the everyday as fragmented reality, as opposed to the heroic wholeness frequently represented of Singapore's public housing, as well as squaring with the idea that it is an impossibility to fully account for. In the months spent thinking about the narrative structure of the film, I was especially struck by how the filming image constantly juxtaposed architecture with something else. Architecture was the subject for me, but in the film, it became background. Architecture only surged to the foreground through the women's embodied actions. Spaces for gathering, sleeping, and cooking were understood through household routines, their repetitions and their durations. Perceptions of physical scale, size, proximity, as well as ideologies, desires, and anxieties were played out in the bodily routines of each woman, who was in turn marked by her class, race, ethnicity, and age. The filmic encounter made the architecture of public housing inseparable from its milieu, its surroundings. It made public housing incredibly difficult to study as a rarefied, isolated object. Yet, the possibility of thinking about public housing simultaneously as both foreground and background also changes the limits of its knowledge. Rather than abstract policy, the film underscores the importance of rethinking public housing through lived embodied occupancy. And again here, as the architectural historian Lynn Walker argued, the gap between domesticity and architecture continues to be challenged and persists as a problem. Thank you.